Good morning everybody, we're back. It's England and we're talking about classic diesel engines again. And either side of me here is the later generation to the ones I've been talking about in my boat. These pair are Ford Dover engines. So my engines in my boat, 1980 they ended, and then the Dover block came out, which is this. So this is 1981 and onwards. And these two engines have been marinised by Saber, so still built by Ford in Dagenham, but marinised by Saber. And the one on my right is a 320 horsepower engine, and the one on my left is a 350 horsepower commercially rated version of the engine. Same fitment, so it'd fit in the same position. Today we're going to explain how they got this much more power, the differences between these and the ones that we've been discussing. These are late 80s, early 90s Ford Dover engine, the next generation on from the Dorset that you've seen me working on my own boat. Fundamentally very similar. The placement of the injection pump is very similar, the arrangement of the injector pipes is very similar, the way that the manifold is fastened on is very similar. Now the obvious difference between these two and the engines that are in my boat, well, these are this nice turquoise colour because these are Saber. So Saber was the marinising company in Wimborne, Dorset, and they basically did their own version of the marinisation. My boat has mermaids. I think the saying goes, mermaid portrayed a big image, Saber were a big image. So I think that Saber were a much larger company that had the fingers in many more pies. Regardless, they both did a good job. So obviously Saber used their own manifolds. Now Saber were known for using stainless steel manifolds. You very rarely see any rust on them. And something that I find interesting about the Saber manifolds is if you look at the exhaust manifold tubes coming from the head, they were round and actually quite small. This engine that I'm pointing at right here is 350 horsepower version. And look how small that tube is. 34 mil. Now, to give you an idea, when we're building 606 engines, we use 42 mil tube, and that's only a 3 litre engine. But you've got to remember that airflow is very relative to RPM, so if an engine revs low, generally, manifold pipework is quite small. Look at a Scania truck, looks like it's breathing through a straw. These two engines that we've got here, this one is called a 350C. The letter on the end stands for its rating. This C is commercial. This one over here is a 320L. Both are Dover engines. And how can we tell the difference between a Dover and a Dorset? Well, there are a few ways that I've realised over the past couple of years. So the front timing chest here that we're looking at there, look, is cast aluminium. So you put a magnet on there, it's not going to stick. Not this, but this. The actual timing chest is cast aluminium. You can see it, look. All aluminium. On a Dorset engine, the older one, that's pressed steel, like tin. The Dorsets, like mine, and like this one, have a tin timing cover. Dorset has smaller inlet ports, or should I say lower inlet ports. The exhaust ports are fundamentally the same size, but the inlet ports are taller on a Dover, which is the newer version. This is the Dorset. So that's a very big difference between the two. If you look round the back, the Dover engines, the later engines like these, they had this outlet pipe in the back of the block to aid coolant flow coming through the engine. Rather than the engine's coolant having to travel all the way to the back and then all the way to the front, that actually created a path so that it could circle the whole block basically easier. I believe that not all Dovers have that, but most that I've seen have. So you can see both of these, the 320 and the 350, both have this outlet pipe. Now another thing that I think is an easy giveaway, if you look at the rocker cover, the pipe on the top of the rocker cover here, look, on a Dover is generally much larger. So if we put a caliper on there, look, about 31 mil. Whereas if you look at one on a Dorset, they're much smaller, they're maybe more like sort of 20 mil, they're a lot smaller. The main differences, we've got the front timing chest, different material. We've got that rear outlet pipe, this being larger, but the not so obvious difference, but if you've watched my videos, is the block casting. The head stud that I had issues with in my own engine, as you saw the repair that I did, these have a lot more material on the side of the block and webbing to prevent that from happening. So they realised it was a problem. They knew that it obviously needed some sort of attention, and they resolved that. This 320 that we're looking at here is quite a popular unit. This is quite a well-regarded unit. This is a 360 cubic inch engine, so they're about 6 litres. And we can see that. If you look at that little, I don't know if you can just zoom in there to where my finger's pointing. See there how it says 360T. So that lets you know that this block is a genuine turbo block and 360 cubic inches. That's the size of the engine. Very, very similar to the Dorset that I showed you, and lots of the parts interchange. The head bolts in these are bigger. This one next to me here, the 350C, the commercially rated one, leisure rated, commercially rated. The commercially rated one is actually something a bit special. Come in close, you can see this. So look here where I just showed you. Look how that no longer says 360. That has 380 written on the side. So a larger cubic capacity. On the side of the block here, look, written, let me see if I can get the torch in, Lister Petter. Now the reason it says that is because the blocks on these 350C commercial engines were actually cast by Lister Petter of a larger CC. So although these have a liner, they actually made the blocks, well, they designed the blocks and they had them cast specially for this larger capacity. So it wasn't a case of them just boring it out, they actually put some different effort into the casting to make them actually bigger. And Lister Petter, I believe in Germany, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in Germany, cast these bigger blocks. If you look at lots of classic powerboats, the later ones that had these engines, things like a Supermarine Swordsman's, for example, which is a bit like a more modern day fairy huntsman with a slopey back. They basically had these 350 engines, and you'll see lots of them getting repowered now because although these are brilliant and reliable, they can be a little bit smoky. She's a bit smoky this morning. People think that because they smoke they're broke, but trust me, they're not. They keep going on and on and on, and if you could just put up with the smoke, I think you'd find it a very good engine. Lots of people are repowering those boats, so they're taking these engines out and selling them online. Now, something to be careful of, if you want to rebuild one of these 350 engines, there's a rumour that the pistons aren't available and the parts aren't available, you can't rebuild them. Well, I've managed to find online some tractor pistons out of the Brazilian diesel, the newer, completely different to these, that actually fit. So that might be a possibility. But I have known people basically convert these back to those. So they put a custom liner in and reduce the bore size back down to a 360T because the cylinder heads and all the other bits and pieces are the same. Crankshaft's the same, camshaft's the same. So they can reduce them back to that smaller engine. And then all the parts are more readily available. So that's the thing. Injector pumps are very similar. They do have different settings. Obviously the 350C puts in more fuel. Something interesting that you'll see on this one, this is interesting, to try and reduce the smoke levels, they actually put a system on, which you can see here with this solenoid, that actually cuts the fuel off to half of the injector pump. So we can see the fuel coming in and going out. And then what they did is, rather than allowing it to come out of this half, I believe this is how it works, rather than allowing it to come out of this half, they actually blocked this half off and then made it run on 3 cylinders. So to prevent smoke when the engine was cold, to sort of put it under a bit of artificial load, they ran the engine on 3 cylinders, which is pretty interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's like, if it worked, great. So this is quite common, and if you see this solenoid and you wonder what on earth's going on there, that is what that is. I mean, you can remove that and run it just back normal again. I don't think this one has it. No, it doesn't. This one doesn't. So you can see the fuel pipe on this one comes in and then goes back out, whereas this one, fuel pipe comes in and then it has 2 options to go out. Obviously it can go out here or it can go out here, and I think you can switch that off to prevent those cylinders from working. I think that's I like that kind of engineering. It's mechanical, it's pretty cool, isn't it? It's old school stuff. Apart from that, the engines are very, very similar. Block casting, you're going to see that name on the side. So if somebody tells you that they have a 350, or if you're not sure, have a look for the markings on the casting. Normally you would just see Ford. So if we look at the side of this one, Ford badge on there, look. You can see that there. And then further forward where that says Lister Petter, you won't see anything at all. I think it's just blank. So the other thing that you're going to notice is between a 320 and a 350 is turbo sizing. The turbos on these were obviously getting bigger and bigger than the ones that you've seen in my boat, because obviously this is 320 horsepower and 350 horsepower. My boat only 180. So they increased the turbo size. They're both hull set units, and this basically a HX40, I think is the way to describe it. 57 mil inducer on that one. This one here, I don't know if this would be denoted an HX40 or going up a bit bigger, but this is a 59. I tend to call turbos HX35s 40s because that's quite a modern way of, well, it's probably not modern now, but it's a modern-ish way of explaining to someone I've got a 35 or 40. It gives them an idea of size. In these days, prior to that, I think they were called H1Cs and things like that. They had different names, but that's what I'm referring to with that. Another thing that you're going to notice different to my engine is intercoolers. On my Ford Mermaid engine, the intercooler's on this side, the turbo blows into it, comes into the intercooler, and then it goes across into the inlet manifold. Now these Saber engines, because they were more power, they decided to really go over the top with intercooling them, which is good, we can't complain about that. So they put on two separate intercoolers. They're both doing the same charge circuit. So the turbo, it comes into this top one here. This is the first stage, and then it passes through this section out of the side of the intercooler and into the second stage, and then it goes underneath, because as we remember and we spoke about before, these engines aren't cross-flow. It goes underneath and then into the engine there. And both the 320 and the 350 have that twin intercooler setup. These are denoted as 2728 TIM, turbo intercooled marine. The 2728 TIM would usually have a full size square sump. Now if you look at the smaller engines in the range, some 2726 engines, which were Dovers as well, generally a single intercooler, just one, because they were rated I think at 225 horsepower. They also did some Dover engines, I believe, that were 180 commercial rated. I had one of those actually. Lots of similarities. If you're thinking I've got an old Dorset engine in my boat of 180 horsepower and I want to put in that 320 horsepower, yes you can. The mounts and stuff will swap. The bell housing pattern on the back is the same. Flywheel pattern, crank pattern, all that kind of stuff is the same. So if you want to do a swap, put some big horsepower into your boat, you can. But there's something really important to remember, especially with something like this. This bigger capacity, a lot of fuel, big turbo, this thing will make quite a lot of torque at low RPM. If you're running something like the gearboxes that I've got, the Velvet drives, the Borg Warner 72Cs, thinking, yeah, I want big power, I want to bang one of them in. Well, physically you can, but the problem is, you imagine that you're making, instead of 180 horsepower, suddenly making 350 horsepower at similar RPM levels. The torque is going to go absolutely sky high. And let's remember that horsepower is the important thing that we need to move the vessel. It's power. Power is what we need to move something. Torque is part of the calculation, but torque is the thing that breaks things. So torque is the thing that's going to twist your input shaft, it's going to break your drive plate, it's going to destroy your gearbox, it's going to make your gearbox slip, it's going to damage things, it's going to twist that big prop shaft up. If we wanted to get more horsepower, let's say using the same gearboxes, we'd be better off upping the horsepower and the RPM, because then the torque stays the same. Or do the calculation, you can work it out. I've explained how to work out torque before. But by increasing the RPM, we can make the boat go faster without damaging everything. But if you just bang one of these straight in, you're going to massively increase your torque. Your gearboxes aren't going to handle it. So you'd have to consider some much stronger gearboxes to do that. And I think back in the day they used to use self-changing gears. I don't think the Borg Warners were ever rated to handle that kind of power. I hope that makes sense. I hope I've answered some of the things. More marine stuff for you, but still some cool old turbo diesel technical information. These might be getting sold today. Someone might be coming to buy them. I have this random collection of old diesel engines, and every now and then I'll put them on eBay and have a bit of a clear out. So these might be leaving today, so I thought as a bit of a farewell to them, it'd be worth doing a video. I'm actually sad. It's one of them things. The space means more to me than the money. Like, I'd rather keep these than have the money. I hope you now know a little bit more about Ford, Dover and Dorset engines. Bye for now.